There's goats and sheep and horses, some with medical problems, some with medical problems. Another facility, there's 110. Those have all been evacuated. And I got to say, the good news is that there's been a big effort to inform people to leave early. A lot of them have done so. So we're providing the care to those that were moved, and as you heard about all the stress that occurs with those things, there are medical issues, and we're taking care of those. So today's the biggest day we're going to have in the field is today.
All right, amazing work. Dr. Madigan, thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for bringing the public. Animals are important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And of course, while these fires are blazing, I know people are wondering
why they're so intense in the first place, and is this the new normal? So I want to bring in John Keeley. He's with UCLA. He's an adjunct professor in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. So John, thanks for being with us today. I'm going to ask the question that everyone's asking: is this because of climate change that these fires are so intense right now?
There's very little evidence that climate change is causing Santa Ana winds to become more intense and these fires to become worse. We've had these winds every single autumn for as long as we've been keeping records, well over a century. The winds themselves are not uncommon. Sometimes they're more intense than other times. So there's very little evidence that climate change is causing this. We do have evidence some of our fires, particularly forest fires in the West, may be affected by climate change. But these wind-driven fires have other factors that are far more important. The fact that we're getting these autumn winds causing fires is something that we've seen many times in the past. What we're seeing today, though, is we're seeing more and more of these fire events, and they're having worst impacts on humans. Some of that is due to the fact that we've had an extreme drought in Southern California. It lasted from 2012 to 2018 and caused a lot of dieback of vegetation, creating a tremendous fuel problem. And that's part of it. But the other probably more important factor is humans ignite through igniting a people are being put into watersheds of very dangerous fuels, and many more people are at risk today than in the past.
So you're saying it's sort of a perfect storm of winds and also the population density are the main factors.
The drought and increased population are almost certainly the two major in these big fire events.
So if it's not climate change, as you say, or the major factor, what can be done to prevent this in the future?
Well, first off, it's not to say that climate change isn't having an impact on some fires. And like I mentioned earlier, forest fires in the West seem to be affected by climate change. But these coastal wind-driven don't seem to be affected by changing climates, in part because it's hot enough and dry enough every year to have a big fire. What can we do? Number one thing we can do is work more intensively on fire prevention, stopping fires from igniting during these wind events. That not only involves controlling arson behavior in people, but also the power grid and increasing maintenance, perhaps, thinking more about how we place power lines. For example, in the last decade, our worst fires in Southern California, in fact, throughout the western part of California, has been due to power lines being blown down or igniting fires during these wind events. There's a lot that can be done in terms of the power grid and how we control power.
All right. I appreciate your insight. John Keeley, UCLA adjunct professor, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. And guys, when we come back, a big day on Capitol Hill. We're going to talk about that and more new details in that Syrian raid. We'll be right back. To move to Washington in the ongoing impeachment probe. New details in that first-hand account provided by Alexander Vindman, the first current White House official to testify. So I want to bring in Karen Travers at the White House and Ben Siegel on Capitol Hill. Ben, I'm going to start with you. There's some new details that we learned about the transcript.
That's right. Colonel Vindman, who's the National Security Council's Russia and Ukraine expert, was listening in on that call, and according to reports first in the New York Times, he actually suggested several changes be made to the rough transcript that was eventually released to the public on that call between Presidents Trump and Zelensky. Now, according to the Times, he was not suggesting there was any nefarious motive behind the reason why some of those changes were not allowed to make it to the final cut. There's a routine process that goes on at the White House about these transcripts, which are taken down by machine, and then with experts listening in, they go back and forth over what makes it into the eventual version that's circulated within the White House. But certainly provides a better picture of what was happening on the White House around this call that is now at the center of this impeachment inquiry in the House.
Yeah, and Karen, this is kind of a big deal because, the White House has been saying for a long time that none of these accounts were firsthand. This testimony obviously was. What is their response to Vindman testifying?
Yeah, well, yesterday you saw the president tweeting about this, Kimberly, saying that Vindman was a never-Trumper, somebody who is not in his corner. And allies of the president, of course, were trying to question his allegiance and loyalty because he was born in Ukraine. But it was notable, I think, to see the pushback from even Republican lawmakers yesterday to say that those attacks crossed a line, and it is not fair to question someone's loyalty or patriotism just because they were not born in this country. Now, on the issue of the memo transcript of that that phone call this summer with the president of Ukraine. A month ago, the White House, when we asked about the ellipses, the dots that appeared throughout the transcript, they said that that did not mean parts were not included. It was that were thoughts trailing off there. We've gone back to the White House to see now with Vindman's testimony about things not being included, what they have to say about that. Still no response yet from the White House.
All right, so Bill, Ben, the testimonies continue. Who are we expecting on the Hill today?
We have two State Department officials that are on the Hill today. Catherine Croft is right now with investigators. She was just subpoenaed to prevent the State Department from blocking her testimony. And she is talking to investigators today, and so is Christopher Anderson. They're both officials who worked with Kurt Volker, this former U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine, who was part of those key conversations about Ukraine policy with Gordon Sondland and other key players in this impeachment inquiry in efforts to pressure Ukraine to take up politically centered investigations that could help the president in his re-election bid. These are things that he was seeking, concerns that this was being withheld, of course, that military aid was being withheld for these investigations to be launched. So these are people who are helping to fill in a more vivid picture of the back and forth between the White House and Ukraine about this aid that was held, this $400 million in military aid, and these promises of an investigation that are also at the heart of whether the president created any sort of impeachable offenses here.
Yeah, so definitely more to come. And Karen, before we go, you know, the president, he's been pushing Republicans to defend him on substance when all they've been trying to do, their strategy has been to defend him on the process, to talk about the process of this inquiry. So why would he push them to do substance?
I think the president wants to see Republicans out there saying what he is saying, that the call was perfect, he did nothing wrong, and that's it. End of discussion. Last week, the president, in a cabinet meeting, said that Republicans needed to get tough and needed to fight for him. We saw then 2 days later, Republicans storming that secured room up on Capitol Hill, complaining about the process, saying they were being left out of decisions and not being allowed to play a part in this impeachment inquiry, which, of course, is not true. But now the president seems to be suggesting that Republicans need to change their tactics here, saying they have to fight on the substance. He says if they do with that, then close it out. Go with substance and close it out. That has been difficult for Republicans. I think that's why we've seen them focus on the rules here and focus on the refereeing by House Democrats. Now we're going to see this impeachment inquiry likely head into its next phase, a public phase. That's going to make it even more difficult for Republicans to talk about the process and mechanisms here. Some Democrats say it's because they cannot defend the president on his actions, so they have to talk about everything else.
So much to keep track of. Karen Travers at the White House and Ben Siegel on Capitol Hill. Thank you guys for the updates. We appreciate that. And we're going to move overseas to northern Syria. As you know, the world's most wanted terrorist, the leader of ISIS, was killed in a raid. And now President Trump tweeting yesterday that the #1 replacement for the ISIS leader was also killed by American troops. So I want to bring in Ian Pannell on the ground in northern Iraq. Ian, can you just give us a little idea of who this replacement was?
Yes, I think a replacement might be an overstatement. He was a potential replacement. I think the idea that he was a #2 is definitely over-egging the pudding. It was Abu Hassan al-Muhajir. He was the ISIS spokesman. He was also killed in a very similar kind of operation. In one way, it was a U.S. Special Forces operation together with SDF, this is Kurdish support on the ground. But interestingly, Dr. Russell Travers, who's the acting director of the U.S. National Counterterrorism Center, is testifying on the Hill right now. And he said 3 fascinating things, which again put a slight lie to the claims that this was a #2. He said, first of all, that ISIS has a very deep bench. In other words, there are many replacements ready to take the place of al-Baghdadi. #2, he said there are something like 14,000 ISIS fighters here in Iraq and across the border, showing that it still has large-scale potency. And ultimately, he said that the death of Baghdadi, while important, won't have much impact. Now, we're still waiting to hear from ISIS. They normally take a while to confirm these deaths, and because we've had a lot of false alarms, they've been skeptical online. But there is a suggestion that perhaps in the coming hours we could hear something from ISIS. It may be offering condolences, it may be the usual eulogies. It may, just may, be the announcement of a replacement.
And Ian, before we go, we're learning about the role that this supposed defector played in this raid. If you can tell us more about that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, fascinating detail, Kimberly. I mean, it's almost the stuff of some kind of spy drama. Apparently, this was a disgruntled ISIS fighter who was part of the inner circle of Baghdadi. Apparently, members of his family had been killed by ISIS. However this transpired, he ended up becoming an informant for the Kurds, passing detailed information of the layout of the house, which obviously aided U.S. Special Forces as they went in on this raid. We know that the operative managed to get a pair of underpants and some blood samples so they could verify DNA. The Washington Post also reporting that after the raid, he was taken back with U.S. Special Forces. He was brought out of the country, reunited with his family, and possibly he's going to receive part or all of the $25 million bounty that was placed on Baghdadi's head as the world's most wanted terrorist. No confirmation from the State Department or the Pentagon of this, or indeed from the SDF on the ground, but that's what the Washington Post is reporting. Kimberly?
All right, Ian Panel right there in northern Iraq with the latest. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And guys, when we come back, a big decision from the NCAA.
ABC News, straightforward.
Okay, so when the New York Times calls you one of the 8 news podcasts worth listening to, well, you just say thank you. So go on, start smart with Start Here, the ABC News Daily Podcast. Take us with you. Listen to us now, free on Apple Podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the debrief. We're going to move to some big news from the NCAA, taking a major step that would eventually let college athletes start making money. So our Zachary Quiche joins me now to break this down. Tell me what this means and what it doesn't mean. Because,
yeah, it's complex. I think there's a lot of questions and certainly a little skepticism about what this actually means. But the deal, at least initially moving forward, is that they're opening up the possibility that players will be able to get paid for their name, image, and likeness. We're talking about appearances in video games. We're talking about jerseys that are sold at the campus bookstore. And so certainly this is a step forward for the NCAA, but people who are really in the trenches and who have been fighting for these issues for a long time are skeptical if they're just a stalling mechanism or if they really are serious about allowing players to be compensated for this incredible amount of money that they make for these universities and the leagues as a whole.
So just to be clear, nobody's getting paid right now?
Nobody is getting paid right now. Except for, of course, the people who have been getting paid. I mean, the coaches and again, the universities are making this incredible amount of money. The players aren't. What we have seen is that there are some things happening on the state level. In California, they signed a law in September that would prohibit the NCAA from punishing players who receive endorsement deals as of 2023. Now, they have said, the NCAA has said, this is not in line with the California rule, which is essentially kind of an open market situation. A Republican congressman from North Carolina has something similar on the books that looks more at kind of tax code, but would essentially be an open market, again, for players to get endorsement deals. It doesn't seem on par with the NCAA has decided, and so it'll be interesting to see how these kind of competing visions for the future actually pan out.
Do you think that's the reason why the NCAA made this move, because of Governor Newsom and the other states that are sort of making this happen?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. They are getting a lot of pressure. These are conversations that have been going on for quite some time now, but they've really ramped up.
And LeBron endorsed it.
LeBron endorsed it. But again, certainly pressure, but even yesterday's announcement, on many levels, it still would require players to kind of abide by this antiquated system. And so, again, it's not really clear exactly how these players who are out there laying it all on the line, some of them will turn pro and some of them will benefit in that way, but many of them won't. And so it's really interesting to see how this is going to play out and really how serious or intentional the NCAA is about trying to rectify this.
And right before we go, I mean, this is for you personally. You were an athlete. What does this mean for families?
Oh, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Again, name, image, and likeness is different than being a pro player, but certainly as an athlete myself, I know that I had to take out a small loan to connect the dots, right? There's trips that you have to take home to see your family, you know, between semesters. There are unexpected expenses that come up. I grew up in a household where certainly education was the foundation, but it was on us to pay for it, and the scholarship checks just don't cover it. Now, the NCAA has made some improvements recently in terms of trying to cover the cost of living. They're also guaranteeing scholarships and doing some things like that, but there is still kind of an overwhelming conversation out there led by these voices, as you mentioned, like LeBron and so many others who think that the system is profiting off these players, and at the end of the day, many of them have nothing to show for it.
All right, Zachary Quiche, the news on the NCAA. Appreciate you being here.
Appreciate you.
And guys, continue to take care of yourselves. If you're around, you can stick around for the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. Then you can check out World News Prime at 8 p.m. And if you want to stay updated on all of these headlines, you can go to abcnews.com or download the app. I'll see you tomorrow.
ABC News, straightforward.
Almost every home here has sustained damage.
The roof is like 3 houses down, and the roof's, I think it's right there.
We're glad you're okay.
Oh, thank you.
You could hear the gunfire just around this wall.
So this is one of those checks.
Around the corner here are the children. What's your name? Back on the job.
Back in the job.
Help build my country back.
How are you?
How you doing?
Good to see you.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
Did you get this message?
What's in the studio?
Hey guys, I wouldn't go in that studio.